Hello everybody, this is Kirby over yonder, and I've talked about the best Adventure Time episodes, now time to talk about the worst. I love Adventure Time, but it sure has its fair share of flaws. It can be an artistic masterpiece one moment and a pretentious mess the other moment. That's kind of why I find the show to be so interesting to talk about. Even though I will be tearing the show apart here, just keep in mind that I do genuinely love the show. If I didn't, I wouldn't care about its bad episodes. It would just be bad episodes of a show I don't like. The rules for this list will be the same as the rules for the best list. No Come Along With Me, not that it would even be on the list in the first place. The Stakes, Islands, and Elements miniseries won't be allowed on the list, however individual episodes from those miniseries will be allowed. Double-length episodes are allowed on the list, and episodes like Mortal Folly and Mortal Recoil that are technically two different episodes, but make up one full story and are spliced together, will be counted as one episode. With all that said and out of the way, here are my top 10 least favorite Adventure Time episodes. At number 10, we have James. This is an episode with very weird tonal problems. I actually really like the idea of this episode. Finn, Jake, and Princess Bubblegum being stuck in a ship surrounded by candy zombies sounds like a really cool and intense idea for an episode. But then you have James, who is an annoying character. In my best list, I mentioned that Simon and Marcy does an amazing job balancing the comedy with the drama. Neither aspect of the episode fully takes over the other, and both are necessary in order for the story to work. In this episode, the comedy feels so out of place in what's otherwise a very dire situation. At least with the sequel episode, James 2, they knew that James was a weird and stupid character, and didn't try to awkwardly place him in a serious situation. Granted, I don't really like that episode much either, but hey, it's better than this one. Oh, and then the episode tries to make us care about James by having him sacrifice himself, and it just feels so unearned. It doesn't feel like he sacrificed himself because he's a hero, it feels like he sacrificed himself because he's just stupid. Then it's revealed that it was actually Princess Bubblegum sabotaging the mission and not James. Which makes no sense. Even if Finn and Jake's plans won't work, what do they lose from carrying them out? Also, why didn't she just tell Finn and Jake that their plans won't work instead of just sabotaging them? This twist was only done to make James look more competent than he actually is. James is just a mess of an episode. It's number 10 on this list because, like I said before, the episode does have some cool ideas, but said ideas are ruined by the tone and execution of the episode. At number 9, we have Chips and Ice Cream. You know that Teen Titans Go episode where Cyborg and Beast Boy only say waffles for the entire episode? You know how everyone hates that one because of how repetitive and annoying it is? Well, this one's basically the same idea. So basically, there's this man named Morty Rogers, and he has these two guys on his head, and all they say is chips and ice cream, and he uses them to entertain children. But basically, he's tired of having them on his head, so he forcefully gives them to Jake. All these characters say is chips and ice cream, and it gets really annoying really fast. Also, they sing in one part, and it's... no. Please no. I also find Morty Rogers to be a very confusing character. He goes from being relieved to no longer have chips and ice cream, to desperately wanting them back with very little transition. I guess I kinda like the ending where chips and ice cream are set free, but that's really the only bit of substance I got out of this episode. Chips and Ice Cream is an annoying episode that I don't really get any enjoyment out of. At number 8, we have The Prince Who Wanted Everything. Truth be told, I've never really been a fan of the Fiona and Cake episodes of Adventure Time. I don't hate them or anything, I just find it to be a less interesting version of the show itself. Meanwhile, I've always found LSP to be kind of a hit or miss character. She definitely works in episodes like Bad Timing and the Elements miniseries, but in episodes like The Monster, Princess Day, Be Sweet, or Summer Showers, she can be more annoying than actually funny. So combine the concept I feel lukewarm on with a character that can be very hit or miss, and you've got this episode. LSP is probably at her most obnoxious in this episode, tying Ice King down and forcing him to read her book. And Lumpy Space Prince himself is not much better. The plot itself is pretty stock too, where at first Lumpy Space Prince is living the royal and fancy life, only to be humbled by the simplicity of peasant life. So it's a stock plot combined with an annoying main character, also combined with the fact that it's a Fiona and Cake episode, meaning none of it really matters, and you have a pretty lackluster episode. I guess the ending's kinda funny, but that's really about it. At number 7, we have Lemonhope, a two-part episode that really didn't need to be one. There is quite a bit of padding in this one, especially with those obnoxious dream sequences. They come off as much more pretentious than they do deep or thought-provoking. This is made even more insulting when you remember that the Betty episode was literally 2 episodes before this one. And while I like that episode, I also think it easily could have benefited from being a two-parter. I don't find Lemonhope to be a very interesting character, mostly because we don't really know what his motivations are. Like, why doesn't he want to save Castle Lemongrab? Because he's lazy, I guess? We don't really know. Why did he change his mind later in the episode? I think because he felt guilty, but if that's the case, then why didn't he feel guilty before? Maybe if the episode didn't have all those dream sequences, it could have focused more on Lemonhope's motivations. I also question why Lemonhope specifically had to be the one to save Castle Lemongrab as opposed to Finn or Princess Bubblegum. I mean, it's not like they haven't interfered with Lemongrab affairs before. Also, Lemonhope sounds really similar to Morty from Rick and Morty, and that gets kinda distracting. I know this is more of a problem with Justin Roiland's voice acting than the show itself, but it still kinda bugs me. The ending of the episode is easily its best part. The song itself is very sweet, and the visuals are gorgeous. If you want to see it, I suggest just looking up the clip on YouTube as opposed to watching the episode itself, because it's really not worth it. Lemonhope is a boring episode that's not really worth my time and is much longer than it needs to be. At number 6, we have Too Old. This episode comes shortly after Finn and Flame Princess's breakup, which, trust me, we'll be getting to that later. But for now, let's just talk about this episode. This episode has a lot of Finn being kinda creepy around Princess Bubblegum, and I really don't like it. In last season's Burning Low, there was a really good scene of Finn telling Princess Bubblegum that he used to be in love with her, and that he's now over her. It was so satisfying to see Finn finally admit that he's done with Princess Bubblegum. So to see Finn regress to how he was back in seasons 1 and 2 is really disappointing. I know stuff like this can happen in real life, but just because something is realistic doesn't mean it's believable. I actually think the idea of Finn and Princess Bubblegum pranking Lemongrab like they did in Too Young is kind of cool, but the way it's executed to make Finn look more pathetic than usual is really annoying. Also, at the end of the episode, Finn would rather play pranks than actually help save the day, because that's totally in character for him, right? Also, Lemongrab and the Lemon People are in this episode, and I'm gonna be honest, this was around the point where I really stopped caring for Lemongrab. He was a funny and interesting character in his first few appearances, but when the show actually wanted us to take him seriously, that's when I stopped caring. Too Old is just an episode that I really don't like going back to. Definitely one of my least favorites. At number 5, we have Breezy. The infamous episode where Finn gets his arm back. But hey, that's not the only thing I don't like about this one. So basically, Finn's flower arm is feeling droopier, so his solution is to kiss a bunch of princesses until it feels better. Really not going on adventures with Jake, playing BMO, or singing songs with Marceline? Okay. Watching Finn make out with a bunch of princesses isn't very interesting. Meanwhile, the entire time, there's this bee named Breezy following him around that wants to bone his flower arm. She's kind of annoying. Speaking of boning, things sure do happen between Finn and LSP, heh. Oh boy. And I'm pretty sure without Finn's consent too. He clearly didn't want to go through with that. Actually, I changed my mind about the prince who wanted everything. This is LSP's worst appearance. Then we get to the infamous scene where Finn gets his arm back. How exactly does he get it back? So first Breezy comes up and she's singing, then Finn wakes up and starts singing too. Then Breezy turns into Princess Bubblegum for some reason, and then Finn's flower turns into a tree, and then the tree explodes, and then arm. Ah yes, I sure do love it when things make sense. As I said in my best Adventure Time episodes list, Finn losing his arm in Escape from the Citadel is one of my favorite moments in the entire series. It signified his loss of innocence, his change from a naive and optimistic adventurer to a person who's been damaged and hurt but still tries to do the right thing. So to have Finn just get his arm back 4 episodes later and in a way that doesn't make any sense just feels so insulting. I know this was most likely a decision by the network and not the creators, but it was still a bad decision. I'm glad the show used the concept of Finn losing his arm again in Season 8, because it really is a cool idea, and hey, this time he gets an awesome robot arm. But that doesn't change the disappointment I felt after watching this episode. At number 4, we have Sad Face. Easily the most nothing episode in all of Adventure Time. Have you ever wanted to watch Jake's Tale in the circus? What's that? No? You'd rather watch characters you actually care about? Ha ha ha, well get out of here. At least Lemonhope was an actual character. Granted, not a very well written one, but a character regardless. Here it's just Jake's Tale. It can't even speak, or emote, or show any signs of having some sort of personality. It's not even like Thank You, where the story is told with almost no dialogue whatsoever. Here, there's characters that talk, it's just that Jake's Tale doesn't talk. I also dislike how this episode ignores continuity in order for its story to work. Neither before nor after this episode have any of Jake's body parts been shown to have any sort of sentience whatsoever. Adventure Time has some of the best continuity in any show I've ever seen, possibly even better than BoJack Horseman. So to see them blatantly ignore continuity like this is really annoying. Also, how can Jake's Tale see? Like, seriously, it doesn't have eyes, how can it see? In terms of the actual story of the episode, it's really nothing to write home about. So basically, there's an animal at a circus and it's being abused by the one-dimensional greedy circus man, then Jake's Tale saves the day. Hooray. It's a pretty generic story, all things considered, and the episode doesn't really do anything new or interesting with it. All in all, it's a very boring episode that ignores continuity and isn't very memorable at all. At number 3, we have Red Throne. Ooh boy, this one. In this episode, this guy named Ron John comes into the Fighter Kingdom, frees the Flame King, weakens FP's powers, and forces her to marry him. So she gets the help of Finn to save the day, except not really. The entire episode is just Finn being weird and creepy around Flame Princess and screwing things up. Like, at least Too Old had a point it was trying to make. This episode is just, haha, Finn sure is creepy, isn't he? At this point, it's not even derailing Finn's character for the sake of the story, it's derailing Finn's character for the sake of comedy. Sure, in earlier seasons, Finn had a thing for Princess Bubblegum, but it didn't stop him from being a competent hero. His ability to do what's right regardless of the circumstances was one of the most admirable aspects of his character. But here, he is made so incompetent that it's frustrating. Also, that fight scene between Ron John and the Flame King lasts forever and isn't funny. On the bright side, I do kinda like Cinnamon Bun here. I think he's pretty likable in this episode, but even then, he's just used to show how pathetic Finn is in comparison. Overall, it's an episode that tries way too hard to be funny, which is a sentiment that usually never applies to Adventure Time. At number 2, we have Frost and Fire. This right here, this is the moment Adventure Time jumped the shark. This is Adventure Time's Principal and the Pauper. Their Life of Brian, if you will. What an out-of-character episode for Finn. I know the point of this episode is to show off the darker, more unlikable side to Finn's character, but there are ways to do that without completely destroying his characterization. Finn knows the difference between right and wrong, and good and evil. This was established in episode 5. It is completely out of character for Finn to intentionally cause harm to people that are innocent. Especially to a person he cares about like Flame Princess, and for a very selfish reason. He does it in order to have wet dreams. Okay, to be fair, the second time he did it, it was because of the Cosmic Owl. But first off, he was still being selfish the first time. And second, he still wasn't thinking about the fact that he was hurting people. It never even crossed his mind until it was too late. And not thinking about how your actions will affect others is selfish. And I'm not saying that in other episodes Finn is some perfect saint or anything. He has flaws. He can be impulsive, he represses his traumatic memories, he has an inferiority complex, he often lets his emotions get the better of him, and he can be judgmental. But deliberately causing harm to innocent people is something Finn would never do. Sure, in another way he also hurts innocent people, but in that episode his actions were clearly impulsive. Plus, he almost immediately realizes that what he did was wrong. Finn doesn't actually apologize to Flame Princess until Season 8. And while Bun Bun is a great episode, I'm not sure it was worth the character derailment Finn went through in this episode. Being fair to the episode, I do think that the fight scenes themselves are good out of context. And Ice King is pretty likable in this one, it's kinda hard to screw him up. But aside from that, this one is just painful to go back to for me. And at number 1, we have utter garbage in the form of an episode. Much like how I Remember You was very obviously gonna be my favorite episode of Adventure Time, Water Park Prank is pretty obviously my least favorite. Let's start with the obvious here, the art style. While all the other guest animated episodes still managed to capture the look and feel of an Adventure Time episode, this episode looks like an entirely different show. Heck, if I didn't know better, I'd probably think it is an entirely different show. I mean, it might as well be. In terms of the actual story of this episode, it feels like two different episodes awkwardly spliced together. One with Finn dealing with these daddy sad heads that make people sad, and another with Finn and Jake actually at the water park. Not to mention how out of character and immature Finn and Jake are in this episode. They've regressed so far back they'd put their Season 1 selves to shame. But hey, Ice King ain't very good in this one either. Yeah, remember during the Frost and Fire segment where I said it's hard to screw up the Ice King? Well, this episode does the impossible. Why does Ice King want to freeze this water park? Because he's a dumb old meanie, and he's a bad guy, so he has to do bad things. Even though Ice King was barely even a villain up to this point in the series, and even when he was a villain, he still had motivations to do what he did. The main reason why this episode is my least favorite is because it's the only episode of Adventure Time that doesn't feel like an episode of Adventure Time. Even the other episodes on this list still felt like Adventure Time. Granted, not very good versions of Adventure Time, but still Adventure Time. This feels like it belongs on Nick Jr., and that is a major insult to Adventure Time. And those were my top 10 least favorite Adventure Time episodes. One thing you may have noticed was that every episode on this list was either from Season 5 or Season 6. I don't hate Seasons 5 and 6. They are my two least favorite seasons of the show, but I think they have their handful of good and bad qualities to them. They're very hit or miss seasons. They're also very much a transitional period for the show, where the show was transitioning from being a lighthearted episodic comedy to a more story-driven series. And if it weren't for Seasons 5 and 6, we probably wouldn't have the greatness that is Seasons 7 through 10. So while I do have mixed thoughts on these seasons as a whole, I still do have a lot of respect for them. So please tell me what your least favorite Adventure Time episodes are in the comments, and have a very good day. Kirby out.